Hello, everyone. Alan Knight here with Night Talk Live for another wonderful, wonderful interview that I'm going to have. And today is a great day because it's one of my favorite people of all time. Well, of all time. I just met her a few months ago, but she's already one of my favorite people, Sylvia Marusyk. Sylvia, how are you today?
I am terrific. It's Friday. The sun is shining. Birds are singing, and I'm outside. Doesn't get any better. I'm with one of my favorite people.
I'm glad you said that. That's good that you said that.
True.
Is that your veranda? Your veranda in your new house?
Yeah, it's my sunroom.
Wow. You keep the mosquitoes, being in Winnipeg, you keep the mosquitoes out?
Do you know, they don't like to come up the stairs. So they're, and they're just starting. I've just seen my first mosquito in Manitoba. So, I mean, they're probably in the rural communities. They'll see more of them. But I've only just seen my first one about, I'm going to say 5 days ago.
Wow.
But I told him to tell his friends, no coming upstairs. You guys can go down to the grass. Stay there.
Wonderful. Now, before we get into our topic of this morning, which is all about what was one of our biggest business failures and how did we turn it around? How did we turn lemon into lemonade? Before we get into that, why don't you take 30, 60 seconds and tell people a bit about who you are and what you do so they'll get a context for what we're talking about today.
You bet. Thank you, Alan. I'm an activational speaker on health and well-being. So my area of kind of extreme passion, I touch on every aspect of health and well-being and corporate health as well. So I love to get into businesses and help them build healthier cultures. But my area of extreme passion is dealing with stress. And there has never been a more important time than this time, when we have come into this pandemic with all of the stressors that were plaguing us before. And now many of us are feeling buried with this layer upon layer upon layer that COVID has added to the stress that we were already dealing with. And it's really challenged people in a way that even the healthiest of us have moments where our mental health is fragile, to say the least. So that is my area of extreme passion and focus. So, it's what I talk about. It's what I live. It's what I eat, breathe, and sleep.
Great. And then one of the reasons, and I'm probably going to do this in most of my interviews, because as teachers and coaches, which we both are, sometimes we can get caught up in the teaching mode and not in the sharing personal story mode. And I really think people benefit a lot because, for one thing, they like to see that coaches are walking the talk. They're not just talking about it. They've lived it. They've been through it. They've mastered themselves to a certain degree. So having said that, I love this topic, and I might use this topic quite often in my interviews. So to get started, what would you say is your number one, over the years, biggest, I hate to say failure, but I guess it's the best way to say it, the thing that's been most challenging for you? Call it failure, call it challenge, that you had to go through, how you overcame it, and how it's really impacted your life today.
So there have been a number, but I would say the biggest one happened last year when I was unexpectedly diagnosed with breast cancer after spending 20 years as a professional speaker, teaching people about how extremely capable we are of creating disease in North America. We are exceptional at it. We have diseases that are so tied to lifestyle and to stress, and we are exceptional at that. We can actually create disease and symptoms without really much effort. And my take on that was, hey, if we can do that, we can do the opposite. Right? We are a mind body. We have the power to create health in the same way that we have the power to create disease. And so that was my platform. I'm a hope broker, right? I bring hope to people, a hope that whatever they're experiencing today can get better. And there I was, genetically loaded to develop cancer from both sides of my family, knowing full well that because I was the healthiest person I knew, I did everything right, that I would never be the person to get cancer. I was not going to be that person in my family. And in my family, everyone was diagnosed. Many of my family members have died now. Those that were diagnosed with cancer died of cancer, and in very short periods of time. That I would be the one to downregulate those genes because I knew how to live differently. So when I was diagnosed, I thought I was a complete fraud, that my entire career as an activational speaker, teaching people to create health, was bogus. And what I realized, we talk about failure. They're really, we use that word because everyone understands the context. Nothing is a failure. It is an opportunity. And so when I took a step back and talked with a really good friend of mine about feeling like a fraud, because I was struggling to share that with anybody because you just don't say that. I'm supposed to be the expert. She very wisely said to me, have you not been training for this your entire life? Like, have you not been training for this battle? And I'm like, yes, as a matter of fact, I have been training for this and I've got this. And so I managed to get through the diagnosis just pre-COVID, COVID, surgeries, infections, radiation, many, many personal issues that I'm not even going to go into. Let's just say it was an epically horrific year last year. And I sailed through it because I walked my talk, because I practiced what I preached, and I learned to rely on myself in a way that I never had before. And so I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the stuff that I teach is absolutely genuine, it's authentic, it's real, and it makes a difference. I lived all of it. And so instead of feeling like a fraud, I feel like it was an opportunity given to me to push me over the cliff and allow me to fly instead of fall.
Wow, that is truly inspiring. I could really relate to it because my mother was diagnosed with cancer when I was 13, told she had 6 months to live. She lived for about 15 years. So she was my first role model of the power of the human spirit. You remind me a lot of her. So just one question about that is that when you got diagnosed and initially you must have experienced certain emotions being human. You didn't just zap the emotions away. You probably felt some things, be it fear, anger, frustration. How long did you remain in those negative feelings? And what catapulted you out of those feelings? Was it you talking yourself out of it, doing something specific? How did you get out of it?
I'll tell you, Allan, that is the most brilliant question you could ask me, because forever I will remember that it was not me, but it was others who pulled me out. And I'll share with you what happened to me. That night was a rough night. I was with my children. We cried, we hugged, we talked, we felt. I had to feel all of it, right? If you don't feel it, your issues live in your tissues. So I felt it. I felt the disappointment and the grief, the fear, all of it. The next morning, I was to show up at a factory where I was working with injured workers. And I pulled myself together because I always get up, dress up, and show up no matter what. I can always push down what I need to push down to do that. I've done it probably hundreds of times in my life where I've had something difficult, but I get up, dress up, show up. And I went, and for 3.5 hours, I never told anybody what had happened. I never told anybody for months. Only my closest friends knew what was going on because I wanted to find out what the meaning of the disease was. That's another story. So I showed up at this factory, worked for 3.5 hours, helping injured workers with both emotional injuries and physical injuries find hope and some comfort. And I did that for 3.5 hours, got into my car, looked in my rearview mirror and said, for 3.5 hours, you did not think about yourself once. You helped people in a way that maybe no one else could have today. And I looked at myself straight in the eye and said, you did that with cancer? You are unstoppable. This cancer is nothing. This is not stopping you. You know what your purpose is. This is your purpose. Nothing's stopping you. And that was approximately, I'm going to say 16 hours post-diagnosis, 16 to 20 hours post-diagnosis, that time that I was in the factory. That was it. That's all I needed. And I had never told those workers that, but I told the plant manager that the other day, and we both had a cry, because I will forever love those guys that were on that crew. It's a crew of 8 guys, macho guys, but they are my guys. And that factory I will go to the ends of the earth for those people, because they saved me that day.
That's so, it's amazing that you did it that quickly. So you really need to be acknowledged. So I'm going to ask you another question, a follow-up question that just came to my mind, because I think it's important. You said earlier that I'm not going to die of cancer, or this cancer, or whatever you said. And you said, I don't want to be one of these people that end up letting the disease navigate my life or lead my life. But here's a question. The reality is we're all going to die. The reality is that we're all going to have challenges.
Yeah.
Is there a problem with us developing this attitude, even though it sounds like a positive attitude, that we say, you know what, the mind is powerful, the mind is great, we can overcome all things. And then we're faced, let's say, with an accident where, God forbid, we get paralyzed and we lose a leg. That leg is not coming back. We can adapt to the situation. So is it that important to say we're not going to have cancer? What if we do get cancer? Just because we got cancer doesn't mean we have to be victimized by the cancer. Is there a danger in setting up an unrealistic expectation that we're going to be cancer-free when maybe we won't be cancer-free?
I think it really depends on how you view that, Alan. That's a really deep question. And that's a question each person has to answer for themselves. What I believe, you see, thoughts become things. So if you leave room for doubt, doubt is going to change the trajectory of your life. Having said that, there is a piece of surrender that comes with knowing, for me, knowing that I am unstoppable until I'm done, right? So whatever comes at me, I've lived through what I think are some of the most, not just in the last year, but in my lifetime, I've lived through some pretty unspeakable things that I wouldn't even share publicly. None of it stopped me. So whatever comes at me, I will deal with. I know I will deal with it because I've dealt with some pretty horrible things. I mean, I've lost a child, I've lost my parents, I've lived with, I don't even want to go into it all, but like, I'm not saying bring it on, God. I'm just saying that if I say I am not going to be diagnosed with breast cancer again, this cancer has a very high rate of reoccurrence. You never go into remission. I just put my fingers in my ears and I don't acknowledge that. When they tell me that, when the healthcare professionals tell me that, I'm like, la, la, la. You know what? This is not the thing that's taking me.
So what you're saying is that whatever adversity comes to you in life, you are very confident that you're going to handle it, you're going to manage it, you're going to navigate your way through it. And if something happens that lasts a bit longer, you'll deal with that in the moment. That if you take time to work on your mindset, it's the best case scenario, because no matter what happens, whether you're sick for 2 weeks or 4 weeks, your attitude is good, and your attitude is going to help the physical manifestation of whatever it is. That's what I hear you saying.
Yes. And if you say things like, gee, I hope I don't get cancer again, you have left room for doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Don't leave room for doubt. I have never acknowledged this diagnosis as mine. I always say I have been diagnosed with. I never have uttered the words I have cancer, because I don't. I do not
Wonderful.
own the disease. I don't adhere to labels. Don't buy into a label. If, and then when something happens to you, don't take ownership of it. Just take the power back. Does that make sense, Allan?
You are a truly amazing person who are inspiring us all. Now, I know we were going to talk a little bit about my side, but I think
Yes,
that
can we?
well, you sure you want to, because is it going to go on too long? You want to do it another time, or do you want me to quickly respond to your question?
Oh, well, I hate to take up all the time. That's not fair.
Well, ask me a quick question.
Okay, tell me, what is one perceived failure that you have that relates to where you are in your business today?
Well, if I look at one thing that has affected me negatively over the years, it's all rooted in the one thing. It's rooted in the fact that growing up, I was always compared to my brother, who was Mr. Everything. He was number one in his medical class, really good looking, great athlete, popular. And I was popular, but I didn't have all his attributes. And so as I grew up, it affected my relationships, especially romantic relationships, where I'd be attracted to a woman. We'd have a nice conversation, and then within a very short period of time, she would be backing off, and I could never understand why. But later, I realized that because of my insecurity and fear, I was so wrapped up in trying to impress people. I wasn't used to or didn't cultivate the feeling of accepting, loving, and respecting myself as I am, and becoming a genuine, loving, caring person. I was too busy trying to impress. And that went on for years, and that affected my relationships. It affected my business. It affected on me trying to create an image. I would live in a place that looked like I was a lot more successful than I was, driving a car that made me look more successful than I was. I was a bit of a fraud, like you were talking about.
Yeah.
And there came a time where I said, you know what? I'm fed up. I'm fed up working so hard to impress other people. I'm going to learn to accept, love, respect myself exactly as I am. It's part of what I teach people in my 9-step formula, is if I could just accept myself and be more real, be more genuine. Even a couple of years ago, I was coloring my hair, and my friend Lisa in Toronto said, Allan, let it grow, let it be natural. And I said, no, I want to look young. I was still preoccupied with how I looked, and I let go, and everyone's telling me how wonderful I look. Some people said I look like Sean Connery. Now I could die. I'm ready to go up to
You
heaven.
do. And I love the gray. I mean, you were attractive with the dark, but I prefer the gray as well.
But it's just funny how it's worked out. But the reality is, here I am, an old man. I've never felt better about myself. I think I'm cute. I think I'm cool. I think I'm fun.
Yes.
And I'm having a more happy time in my life than ever before. So, but that was the number one thing. And it's kind of funny, because most of the training and coaching I've done are with people that wanted to learn how to communicate with more confidence, with more clarity, with more impact, be it their business relationships or their personal relationships. And if you ask me what's the number one thing that's held most people back that I've met, it's that most people are too hard on themselves. They're way too self-critical. And I'm sure you find that in your work too.
Yeah.
So it's not just me, it's all of us. Many of us have suffered and are suffering from that. And that's why I teach what I teach. And it gives me a lot of satisfaction to know that I can impact people on that level. Does that answer your question, my dear Sylvia?
It absolutely does, Allan. And that's an amazing story. But I have one more little question to ask you about that.
Okay.
What was the thing that helped you realize that you were the biggest barrier to what you wanted in your life? Was there a pivotal moment where you looked in the mirror and said, I'm the problem?
Yeah, I think what happened, it was related to a relationship where I had a pattern in my relationships that I was attracted to women that were unemotionally available, or were not emotionally available. And I tried very hard. It didn't work. And one day I was driving along near a park, and I stopped on the side, and I felt like either I'm going to end up in a mental institute, or I'm going to learn to love myself. And I said, God, you take over. I'm tired of trying so hard. and I got fed up. I got fed up with my pattern. I got emotionally fed up, which I really believe is the key to turning things around. It's not just what we think and how we think. It's emotionally getting fed up with our pattern. And I got
Yes.
so fed up with that pattern that I said, the gig is up. I'm going to change. And from that moment on, I've worked hard to accept and love myself and have never looked back. So that's how I did it.
That is amazing. And you know what, Allan, if you can teach the world to do that, it should be a completely different world.
Well, that's what the soulmate revolution is. My dream has always been to bring people together. We have many soulmates, as you know, but it starts with our own inner soulmate. And this has been wonderful talk. So before we end this one, we'll have to do it again, obviously, Sylvia.
Yes.
Why don't you quickly tell people how they can get in touch with you if they would? I mean, I can't imagine why they wouldn't want to contact you after this video, but tell them how they can contact you.
You bet. You can find me on Facebook under Sylvia Marusyk, Marusyk. You can find me on Instagram, mindbody.works, or you can come to my website, www.mindbodyworks.ca.
Wonderful.
Or I'm on LinkedIn too.
She's everywhere. You could find her everywhere. Sylvia, thank you so much. We got to do this again for sure.
Thank you, my friend.
We'll talk soon.
You bet.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye.